I want to take a moment and go over the 10 most common questions I get on microgreens. You can imagine with all the microgreens content I put out there that I get a whole lot of questions, and almost every single time I've answered these questions in another video, but I can't expect you to always know that that video exists or to find it. So I'm going to go through that list. Just wrote it up real quick. It's all off the top of my head, so if I ramble or something, forgive me. I'm going to do my best. Question number 1 is regulations. Everybody wants to know how they can legally grow microgreens. What kind of inspections are required? What kind of regulations or licensing or insurance and all that do they need to legally grow microgreens? I did a whole long video about this, but my short answer in that video was that I don't know the answer, because where I live in my state, my regulations are one thing, but where you live in your state, the regulations can be totally different. The best thing you can do is go to your Department of Agriculture on your computer. They almost always have a website, and look through all their regulations when it comes to like small grow operations. As you get really big, obviously you're under a different category, but if you're a small grower, you can fall under certain categories. Many states have certain categories you could fall under that if you're making less than, say, $25,000 a year on your business growing microgreens or even baking things or whatever, that you may fall under almost no regulations at all. That's going to depend on your state. They're all different. My state of New Hampshire is very lenient. If you're making less than, I believe it's 25 grand, there's almost no regulations at all. Second most common question is on lighting. Everybody wants to know what lighting is required to grow microgreens. What I always tell people is you can use just about any light from Home Depot, fluorescent light even, but what you want is something that's like 6,000 Kelvin or higher, which is the color spectrum. You want something that's towards the blue color spectrum because that's going to promote leafy greens to grow. The red side of the color spectrum is what will promote flowering and fruiting. You're not going to need that with microgreens. I use some really nice active grow LED lights because they're really low energy consumption, and I've been doing this for a while, and I actually have made quite a few videos for active grow LED, so I've been fortunate enough to get some product by making the videos for them. But I really recommend them. They're a great product. I'll put a link in the description for active grow LED. But you don't need that. I started off growing with just regular fluorescents, 6500K, which is a daylight bulb, and they work great. No complaints. They use about twice the power, 2 to 3 times the power of the active grow LEDs that I use. But there's a whole slew of LED lights you can go buy. Just always make sure that you're getting a color spectrum that's upwards of like 6K. With growing microgreens, you're not worried all that much about all the power. There's all kinds of measurements you can take. How powerful a light is. There's PAR readings you can do. A lot of people get really caught up in all these numbers when it comes to a light. And I can tell you that when it comes to microgreens, it doesn't mean anything. You can go with some of the lowest power lights you can get, and they'll work just fine. I have gone as low as those like stick-on LED strip lights, and they worked, but they didn't work great. So you want a little bit more power than that, but don't get caught up in all the numbers. Try a light. If it works good for you, the numbers don't mean anything. That's at least my motto. I don't care. If I've grown enough different kinds of microgreens to know if the light is performing well or not, and I have good lights to compare them against. And most of the time, you don't need anything special. Just something with a daylight color spectrum and enough power to grow the plants. Question number 3 is pricing. How do you price your microgreens? I just made a whole long video where I broke this down like in pretty good detail, and it's kind of a difficult question to answer quickly, but I'll do my best. Basically, to understand pricing, you have to understand your cost. So you have to figure out how much your seed costs per tray, which I have a calculator for that. That's in the description. You need to know how much your soil's costing, how much your lighting is costing, which I typically don't worry about that because lighting per tray is going to be very minimal, especially if you're using like 4-foot long bulbs. They're say 14 watts each, maybe 22 watts each, and you've got, 5 or 6 trays underneath it. It's a minimal expense, but you can still account for that. You know how much your packaging costs, how much your labeling costs, how much your labor costs, how much your delivery time is. All that comes into cost. So before you can price your microgreens, you need to know how much it costs you to produce them. One thing you can do to really help you out with those numbers, though, is make sure that you're growing some crops that have a really high yield, things like peas and radish. You can get a whole bunch of yield off one tray. So when you price those are making a whole lot more money per tray than something like, say, amaranth or basil. But what you do is you kind of play with the numbers a little bit, and you're going to make a lot more off that radish and the peas, and you might not make hardly anything off, say, the basil and the amaranth, but you're working the numbers in a way that it makes sense, that you're still doing pretty good. And the reason that you're growing the amaranth and the basil and the other crops like that is because by having those crops to offer, people are buying the other crops, which you're making a lot more money on. If you didn't provide things like, the basil, the amaranth, bull's blood beets, things like that, certain chefs may not even buy your other product, or they might not buy anything from you because somebody else is providing the full spectrum that they're interested in. So, short answer on that is, for pricing, you need to figure out your costs. You need to figure out what you need to make, and then you have to figure out what the market will pay. Now, that's probably what people want to know when they're asking me about pricing is, what's the market going to pay? Well, that's also going to depend on your area. For me, my average clamshell of a 2-ounce product is between $6 and $10. And if it's a really small order, to a lot of the restaurants that I have that only take 3 to 4 2-ounce packages a week, they might all be $10. The peas I keep right at $6. I don't go above $6 for pea shoots. But that's my price. You have to figure out what's your market paying. And if you're really unsure, you can always ask your customer, what are you used to paying? You can look at people's websites. You can look at stores, see what they're selling for in the store. Whatever it's selling for in the store, you can pretty much guarantee that you can mark that up like 30%, because what's in the store probably is not going to be as good of a quality product as what you're actually growing locally. Question number 4, stacking your microgreens. I get asked which seeds to stack and which ones not to stack. The easiest way to answer that is basically which ones I do not stack. So out of the most common microgreens that I grow, the ones I do not stack is basil and amaranth. Those are the ones that I grow most commonly that I do not stack. Everything else I stack. All brassicas, mixes, radish, peas, sunflower. I don't actually stack bull's blood beets, but you can. It's kind of a experiment. I'm still actually trying to figure out which way I like best with that. All kales, all that stuff, I stack them all. How much weight to put on them? I actually don't add weight. What I do is I stack them all up to like maybe 4 high, and then I use a tray that I don't stack as my cap tray. So something like basil or amaranth will go on the very top of the stack and just get a blackout dome upside down tray on top of it, and that will be my final weight. I don't bother with adding concrete bricks, whatever. I just use a cap tray. I'm always going to be growing things like the basil and the amaranth, so it doesn't matter to me to just grow that tray that way. Other seeds that I do not stack, that I do not grow as commonly, is cress. I don't need to, but you could, but it's not going to be stacked very long because cress grows so fast. Dill, I don't stack. Fennel, I don't stack. Basically, the really delicate greens are the ones I don't stack, and everything else I stack. Question 5. We're about halfway through. This one is about watering. Now, how do you water your microgreens? Which ones do you water from below? Which ones do you water above? Now, what that means, though, is that most of my microgreens I plant in 2 trays. So I have a tray without holes, and then a tray with holes inside of it that I put my soil in, and then plant my seeds on top of that. The reason you do that is so you can bottom water. So you pick up the tray with holes and you add the water in the bottom and drop the tray back in. This prevents knocking over all the delicate greens. There's very few microgreens that I water from above that I'll grow in just a single tray. Peas are one of them, sunflower is another one, and radish you can get away with it, but I almost always bottom water, but you don't have to. Almost everything else, I bottom water. Fava bean would be another one you can top water. Anything that's rigid enough to be able to handle the sprayer going over the top, those can all be top watered. You don't have to bottom water those. And some things like peas and sunflower especially, it's a benefit to top water because they have a tendency to pick up soil when they grow, especially the seed holes that are still on the sunflower. And top watering them helps rinse all that off and get them clean for when it's time to harvest. I never water while they're stacked. So typically my microgreens are stacked for about 3 days. And I'd never water while they're stacked. They just don't need it. I water so heavily and get that soil so wet that when I plant and stack, they're still soaked when I unstack. And I don't have to water for at least a day after I've unstacked them. Also around watering is people want to know pH. Do I treat my water to get the pH just right? I'm very fortunate in that I don't have to. I have a dug well. I live out in the sticks in the middle of the woods, and my pH in my dug well is just fine. It's somewhere around 7 pH. Can't tell you exactly for sure, but I've never had a reason to change the pH of my water because all my microgreens grow just fine. I have tested it, but because I don't worry about it, I don't know the exact number, but it's somewhere around 7. Number 6, how long should you grow your microgreens for? Now, I recently had a question about peas on this, and the reason was because the person felt that they were getting kind of fibrous. They weren't as tender as they wanted. And the thing is with peas is that the earlier you harvest them, the more tender they're going to be, but the lower the yield is going to be. So if you let them grow a couple days longer, you're going to get a whole lot more yield, but maybe they're not as tender. That's also going to change depending on which variety of peas you're growing. Pea shoots like speckled peas, I harvest those after about 10 days. I only let them get, so tall, maybe 6 inches tops, and a couple little stringers, tendrils coming off them, but not much, and they're ready. Much longer than that, they do start to get a little fibrous. Green pea or a pea tendril, I'll let that grow for about 14 days or so until I have enough pea tendrils growing off the top that I'm happy with it. And I think that that's like the perfect size pea tendril. And that's when I decide those are ready to go. Most microgreens, it's not critical exactly when you harvest them, but one is extremely critical, and that is sunflower. The second you let that first true leaf show in sunflower, they become bitter. You don't want that to happen. I mean, if they're really tiny first true leaves, you're okay. But the second they start getting very large at all, that crop isn't very good. And you just ruined your sunflower. So it's critical that you harvest sunflower at a certain time. Other microgreens, though, there's like at least a week-long window, maybe even longer for some. Something like bull's blood beets, I actually really like to get a nice size first true leaf. Kales are another one that I like doing that with. Basil, I'll usually let the first true leaf come in quite a bit to increase the yield amount and make it a little bit easier to handle, because if you harvest them before that true leaf comes in, basil is very, very delicate and you're not going to get much off of a tray. Mustards, I really like having a nice size first true leaf in mustard. So most things that have a nice first true leaf, I'll grow them until I have a nice size true leaf and then harvest them. if you're going to grow that way, it's important that you keep your density low when you plant. You don't want them crowded. You want to make sure you have really great airflow. Otherwise, they're all going to it'll look great on the top, but as soon as you go to harvest them, you'll have these gooey microgreens down below that airflow couldn't get in there and keep them dry, and they never made it up to the top. And it's unfortunate because you'll have a beautiful looking tray, and then you'll go to harvest it and realize that that tray is ruined. The best thing to do is plant really sparse if you know you want to grow for a good sized true leaf. I wouldn't call them a baby green. They're still a microgreen, maybe a macro green, but they're a little bit bigger than, just the cotyledon leaves. Question number 7. My clamshells. Where do I get my clamshells? My clamshells come from Amazon. I'll put a link in the description for that. They are Gen Pack, and they are 16-ounce clamshells. They're a plastic clamshell. They are biodegradable to a point. At least they say they are. They're recyclable. They're probably not the best for the environment, to be totally honest. But they work extremely well for keeping the microgreens nice and fresh. If you want to try more planet-friendly clamshells, be my guest. I've been happy with these ones. Until I try something better, I'm going to stick with these. A 16-ounce clamshell is a fluid ounce clamshell. So they're all measured in fluid ounces. But 2 ounces of cut microgreens fits perfect in a clamshell. And it's kind of amazing. It doesn't matter if it's basil, amaranth, or pea shoots or sunflower shoots. 2 ounces goes perfect in a 16 fluid ounce clamshell. So again, Amazon, Webstaurant is another place you can get them from, but they're pretty high in their shipping cost. And I have Amazon Prime, and so I always buy the Prime clamshells. Free shipping. I ordered some last night. I think they were about $33 for 200 of them. So definitely get Prime if you don't have it already, and save yourself on shipping costs for your clamshells. I also have used the 8-ounce clamshells, and those fit 1 ounce of microgreens perfectly in those. I don't have a lot of use for those, so I don't use them very often. Where do I get my seeds? That's a question that I think I answer in almost every video because I am an affiliate for True Leaf Market, and that is where I get all my seeds. I swear by them. They're a great company. You can buy seeds, trays, soil, different grow mediums, anything you pretty much need, you can get it at True Leaf Market. Not the biggest lighten supply, but they do have a couple, but nothing that I've seen that I'd probably buy at this moment. But I've been very happy with True Leaf Market. They have a really nice rewards program where the more seeds you buy, more rewards you get, and then you can get some free stuff. You'll actually get some credit. That's who I've been using for the 3+ years that I've been doing microgreens, and it's the only company I've bought seeds from, to be honest. So if you want to try somebody else, go ahead. There's other great companies out there. I know Mums is really popular in Canada. Johnny's is a really popular company. I think they're from Maine. Not 100% sure, but they're kind of close to me. There's some great companies out there. Go ahead and try whoever you want, but if you want to support me and you want to try True Leaf Market, use my link in the description. I'll get a small commission. No extra cost to you. Don't feel like you have to do that, but hey, if you're going to buy through True Leaf anyways, and you found my videos educational, then please use my link. I appreciate it. Question 9. Soil. What soil should you use for microgreens? There's a huge amount of soil you can use for microgreens, but I'll tell you what my requirements are when it comes to picking out soil for microgreens. You don't want it to be super expensive. You don't want the most nutrient-dense, expensive soil you can get. Soils that are great and they work good for microgreens, but I don't recommend would be like Happy Frog, Fox Farm. Those soils, they're great. And I'm sure they have different levels in their company, but I don't recommend that too much for microgreens because they're a very expensive soil. They're made for a long-term potted grow for something that's going to need a lot of nutrients. And Microgreens do need nutrients, but they don't need a lot. One of the big requirements is that it has to be a light, fluffy soil. Lots of perlite is desirable. Lots of coco coir is desirable. You do want some nutrients in that soil, but it's not really like a high qualifications. So the brands that I really like Pro Mix. I've tried a couple different levels. Always great. Really light and fluffy. Good drainage. You don't want that water sitting around. Sunshine Mix Advanced number 4 is one I've used quite a bit, and I've been very happy with that. Black Gold is another great one, which is organic. So if you really need to make sure you're grown organically, Black Gold is a great way to go. And there's a whole bunch of them out there, but those are 3 of the ones that I use most commonly. And you can get those on Amazon, or Black Gold you can actually get at even Ace Hardware. Home Depot, they don't have a lot, but in a pinch, I've even used Miracle-Gro. A lot of you will frown at that. But Miracle-Gro also has an organic Miracle-Gro, which it works good enough. It's just not my favorite soil. It's not light and fluffy enough. I want it to dry out quick, not retain moisture. Finally, question number 10. Grow mediums, grow pads. Which grow pads do I like the most? Well, I've done a whole video where I tested a bunch of different grow pads, and I've done several other videos where I've tested different grow pads. My favorite grow pad, I think of all, is hemp. I really, really enjoy hemp. You don't need to add any nutrients to hemp, at least for most microgreen grows. I haven't had extensive experience growing with hemp, but the things I have grown on hemp grew great without adding any nutrients to it. Huge bonus there. It biodegrades really well, so you can put it right in a compost pile and it will break down. It's just a great all-around product. The problem I have with hemp is I have a hard time finding it at a very affordable price. Soil, for me, is right around $1 per tray. And so when I'm looking at anything that's an alternative to soil, I'm shooting for right around that $1 per tray price target. And a lot of the mats that I've grown don't quite hit that. But when I'm growing indoors in the wintertime, or if I'm growing certain products that really like to be grown hydroponically, basil's one of those I have really good results with, amaranth's another, then something other than soil makes a lot of sense. Hemp's a little expensive, but I really, really like it. It's one of my favorites. Another favorite would be rock wool. That's something I've been playing around with a lot lately. And I have had some issues where sometimes they don't want to root into it. And I think that could be a pH problem. I know that a lot of hydroponic growers will actually soak their rock wool and then change the pH, because rock wool, I can't tell you for sure if it's really acidic or alkaline, but it's one of them, and you sometimes need to change that. So I might do an experiment on that soon. I haven't tested that theory out yet, but that's my guess on why sometimes my microgreens don't want to root in them. Some microgreens have no problem. Like amaranth and basils, they root into the rock wool no problem. And I've had trays that were great, and then other ones that were not. So I'm not sure what the problem is there yet. But anyways, rock wool is one of my favorites. Coco coir is another great one. And then we'll get down into the ones I'm not a huge fan of. BioStraight, it's okay. I'm not crazy about it. Jute Mats, I've done a whole thing recently on Jute Mats versus rock wool. Jute Mats didn't fare that well for me. They do work, but I'm not crazy about them. There's a wood fiber mat that I had extreme mold problems from. I think I'm going to try those again, and I'm going to use like an antifungal like in the water throughout the whole grow and see how that works. Keep an eye out for that. The reason I'm interested in making that work is I bought 100 of the mats when I bought them to keep that price target really low. And so if I can make those work for me, that'd be great. I had high hopes for them because they really retained water. They seemed like they were going to work great, and I had mold problems with them almost every time. And I've heard that from other growers as well. So we'll see how the antifungal works with the wood fiber mats. I think that's going to be about it for today. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope that this answers some of the questions that you might have had. I know it's a long video of me just standing here talking, and I feel that too, trust me. If you like this video, if you found it educational, go ahead and subscribe and share this video with other growers if you're interested. Keep on the lookout for more educational microgreens videos. Thanks for watching.